Hello, my friends. It's Indiana Holmes for story time. Still getting a little bit over my cold, but I think, although my voice may sound a little bit in a lower register, I think I'll be okay to read tonight. We continue with Agatha Christie's novel, The Seven Dials Mystery, and we begin with Chapter 16, The House Party at the Abbey. Bundle drove over to Wyvern Abbey just in time for tea on Friday afternoon. George Lomax came forward to welcome her with considerable empressement. "My dear Eileen," he said, "I can't tell you how pleased I am to see you here. You must forgive me my not having invited you when I asked your father. But to tell the truth, I never dreamed that a party of this kind would appeal to you. I was both surprised and delighted when Lady Caterham told me of your interest in politics." "I wanted to come so much," said Bundle in a simple, ingenious manner. "Mrs. Makata will not arrive till later on the train," explained George. "She was speaking at a meeting in Manchester last night. Do you know Thesiger? Quite a young fellow, but remarkable grasp of foreign politics. One could hardly suspect it from his appearance." "I know Mr. Thesiger," said Bundle, and shook hands solemnly with Jimmy, whom she observed had parted his hair in the middle, in an endeavor to add earnestness to his expression. "Look here," said Jimmy, in a low, hurried voice, as George temporarily withdrew. "You mustn't be angry, but I have told Bill about our little stunt." "Bill?" said Bundle, annoyed. "Well, after all," said Jimmy, "Bill is one of the lads, you know. Ronnie was a pal of his, and so was Jerry." "Oh, I know," said Bundle. "But you think it's a pity. Sorry." "Bill's all right, of course. It isn't that," said Bundle. "But Bill's a born blunderer." "Not mentally very agile," suggested Jimmy. "But you forget one thing. Bill's got a very hefty fist, and I've an idea that a hefty fist is going to come in handy." "Well, perhaps you're right. How did he take it?" "Well, he clutched his head a good bit, but I mean the facts took some driving home. But by repeating the thing patiently in words of one syllable, I at last got it into his thick head, and naturally he's with us to the death, as you might say." George reappeared suddenly. "I must make some introductions, Eileen. This is Sir Stanley Rigby, Lady Eileen Brent, Mr. O'Rourke." The Air Minister was a little round man with a cheerful smile. Mr. O'Rourke, a tall young man with laughing blue eyes and a typical Irish face, greeted Bundle with enthusiasm. "And I, thinking it was going to be a dull political party entirely," he murmured in an adroit whisper. "Hush," said Bundle. "I'm political, very political. Sir Oswald and Lady Coote, you know," continued George. "We've never actually met," said Bundle, smiling. She was mentally applauding her father's descriptive powers. Sir Oswald took her hand in an iron grip and winced slightly. Lady Coote, after a somewhat mournful greeting, had turned to Jimmy Thesiger and appeared to be registering something closely akin to pleasure. Despite his reprehensible habit of being late for breakfast, Lady Coote had a fondness for this amiable, pink-faced young man. His air of impressible good nature fascinated her. She had a motherly wish to cure him of his bad habits and form him into one of the world's workers. Whether once formed he would be as attractive was a question she had never asked herself. She began now to tell him of a very painful motor accident which had happened to one of her friends. "Mr. Bateman," said George briefly, as one would pass on to better things. A serious, pale-faced young man bowed. "And now," continued George, "I must introduce you to Countess Radetzky." Countess Radetzky had been conversing with Mr. Bateman. Leaning very far back on the sofa, with her legs crossed in a daring manner, she was smoking a cigarette in an incredibly long turquoise-studded holder. Bundle thought she was one of the most beautiful women she had ever seen. Her eyes were very large and blue. Her hair was coal black. She had a matte skin, a slightly flattened nose, of the Slav, and a sinuous, slender body. Her lips were reddened to a degree with which Bundle was sure Wyvern Abbey was totally unacquainted. She said eagerly, "This is Mrs. Makata, yes?" "Oh," George is replying in a negative and introducing Bundle. The Countess gave her a careless nod, at once resumed her conversation with a serious Mr. Bateman. Bundle heard Jimmy's voice in her ear. "Pongo is absolutely fascinated by the lovely Slav," he said. "Pathetic, isn't it? Come and have some tea." They drifted once more into the neighborhood of Sir Oswald Coote. "That's a fine place of yours, Chimneys," remarked the great man. "I'm glad you liked it," said Bundle meekly. "Wants new plumbing," said Sir Oswald. "Bring it up to date, you know." He ruminated for a minute or two. "I'm taking the Duke of Alton's place, 3 years. Just while I'm looking round for a place of my own. Your father couldn't sell it if he wanted to, I suppose." Bundle felt her breath taken away. She had a nightmare vision of England with innumerable Cootes in innumerable counterparts of Chimneys and all, be it understood, with an entirely new system of plumbing installed. She felt a sudden violent resentment, which she told herself was absurd. After all, contrasting Lord Caterham with Sir Oswald Coote, there was no doubt as to who would go to the wall. Sir Oswald had one of those powerful personalities which make all those with whom they come into contact appear fated. He was, as Lord Caterham had said, a human steamroller, and yet, undoubtedly, in many ways, Sir Oswald was a stupid man. Apart from his special line of knowledge and his terrific driving force, he was probably intensely ignorant. 100 delicate appreciations of life, which Lord Caterham could and did enjoy, were a sealed book to Sir Oswald. Whilst indulging in these reflections, Bundle continued to chat pleasantly. Eberhard, she heard, had arrived, but was lying down with a nervous headache. This was told to her by Mr. O'Rourke, who managed to find a place by her side and keep it. Altogether, Bundle went up to dress in a pleasant mood of expectation, with a slight nervous dread hovering in the background whenever she thought of the imminent arrival of Mrs. Makata. Bundle felt that dalliance with Mrs. Makata was going to prove no primrose path. Her first shock was when she came down, demurely attired in a black lace frock, and passed along the hall. A footman was standing there, at least a man dressed as a footman, but that square, burly figure lent itself badly to the deception. Bundle stopped and stared. "Superintendent Battle," she breathed. "That's right, Lady Eileen." "Oh," said Bundle uncertainly. "Are you here to keep an eye on things?" "I see." "That warning letter, you know," said the superintendent, "fairly put the wind up Mr. Lomax. Nothing would do for him but that I should come down myself." "But don't you think," began Bundle, and stopped. She hardly liked to suggest to the superintendent that his disguise was not particularly efficient. He seemed to have police officer written all over him, and Bundle could hardly imagine the most unsuspecting criminal failing to be put on his guard. "You think," said Superintendent stolidly, "that I might be recognized?" He gave the final word a distinct capital letter. "I did think so, yes," admitted Bundle. Something that might conceivably have been intended for a smile crossed the woodenness of Superintendent Battle's features. "Put them on their guard, eh? Well, Lady Eileen, why not?" "Why not?" echoed Bundle, rather stupidly, she felt. Superintendent Battle was nodding his head slowly. "We don't want any unpleasantness, do we? He said, "we don't want to be too clever. Just show any light-fingered gentry that may be about. Well, just show them that there's somebody on the spot, so to speak." Bundle gazed at him in some admiration. She could imagine the sudden appearance of so renowned a personage as Superintendent Battle might have been a depressing effect on any scheme and hatchers of it. "It's a great mistake to be too clever," Superintendent Battle was repeating. "The great thing is not to have any unpleasantness this weekend." Bundle passed on, wondering how many of her fellow guests had recognized or would recognize the Scotland Yard detective. In the drawing room, George was standing with a puckered brow and an orange envelope in his hand. "Most vexatious," he said. "A telegram from Mrs. Makata to say she will be unable to be with us. Her children are suffering from mumps." Bundle's heart gave a throb of relief. "I especially feel this on your account, Eileen," said George kindly. "I know how anxious you were to meet her. The Countess, too, will be sadly disappointed." "Oh, never mind," said Bundle. I should hate it if she'd come down and given me the mumps." "A very distressing complaint," agreed George, "but I do not think that infection could be carried away in that way. Indeed, I am sure that Mrs. Makata would have run no risk of that kind. She is a most highly principled woman, with a very real taste of her responsibilities to the community to these days of national distress. We must all take that into account." On the brink of embarking on a speech, George pulled himself up short. "But it must be for another time," he said. "Fortunately, there is no hurry in your case. But the Countess, alas, is only a visitor to our shores." "She's a Hungarian, isn't she?" said Bundle, who was curious about the Countess. "Yes, you have heard, no doubt, of the Young Hungarian Party. The Countess is a leader in that party, a woman of great wealth, left a widow at an early age. She has devoted her money and her talents to public service. She has especially devoted herself to the problem of infant mortality, a terrible problem, one under present conditions in Hungary. Here is Herr Eberhard." The German inventor was younger than Bundle had imagined. He was probably not more than 33 or 34. He was boorish and ill at ease, and yet his personality was not an unpleasing one. His blue eyes were more shy than furtive, and his unpleasant mannerisms, such as one that Bill had described of gnawing his fingernails, arose, she thought, more from nervousness than from any other cause. He was thin and weedy in appearance and looked anemic and delicate. He conversed rather awkwardly with Bundle in a stilted English, and they welcomed the interruption of the joyous Mr. O'Rourke. Presently, Bill bustled. There is no other word for it. In the same such way does favored Newfoundland make his entrance, and at once over to Bundle. He was looking perplexed and harassed. "Hullo, Bundle. Heard you got here. Been kept with my nose to the grindstone all the blessed afternoon, or I'd have seen you before." "Care of state heavy tonight," suggested O'Rourke sympathetically. Bill groaned. "I don't know what your fellow's like," he complained. "Looks a good-natured, tubby little chap, but Cotter's absolutely impossible. Drive, 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 from morning to night. Everything you do is wrong, and everything you haven't done you ought to have done." "Quite like a quotation from a prayer book," remarked Jimmy, who had just strolled up. Bill glanced at them reproachfully. "Nobody knows," he said so pathetically, "what I have to put up with." "Entertaining the Countess, eh?" suggested Jimmy. "Poor Bill, that must have been a sad strain to a woman-hater like yourself." "What's this?" asked Bundle. "After tea," said Jimmy with a grin, "the Countess asked Bill to show her around the interesting old place." "Well, I couldn't refuse, could I?" said Bill, his countenance assuming a brick-red tint. Bundle felt faintly uneasy. She knew only too well the susceptibility of Mr. William Eversley to female charms. In the hands of a woman like Countess, Bill would be as wax. She wondered once more whether Jimmy Thesiger had been wise to take Bill into their confidence. "The Countess," said Bill, "is a very charming woman, and no end intelligent. You should have seen her going round the house. All sorts of questions she asked." "What kind of questions?" asked Bundle suddenly. Bill was vague. "Oh, I don't know. About the history of it, and old furniture, and, all sorts of things." And that moment the Countess swept the room. She seemed a shade breathless. She was looking magnificent in a close-fitting black velvet gown. Bundle noticed how Bill gravitated at once into her immediate neighborhood. The serious, spectacled young man joined them. "Bill and Pongo have both got it badly," observed Jimmy Thesiger with a laugh. Bundle was by no means so sure It was a laughing matter. Chapter 17. After Dinner. George was not a believer in modern innovations. The Abbey was innocent of anything so up-to-date as central heating. Consequently, when the ladies entered the drawing-room after dinner, the temperature of the room was woefully inadequate to the needs of modern evening clothes. The fire that burnt in the well-burnished steel grate became a magnet. The three women huddled round it. "Brrr," said the Countess, a fine exotic foreign sound. "The days are drawing in," said Lady Coote, and drew a flowered atrocity of scarf closer to her ample shoulders. "Why on earth doesn't George have the house properly heated?" said Bundle. "You English, you never heat your houses," said the Countess. She took out her long cigarette holder and began to smoke. "That grate is old-fashioned," said Lady Coote. "The heat goes up the chimney instead of into the room." "Oh!" said the Countess. There was a pause. The Countess was so plainly bored by her company that conversation became difficult. "It's funny," said Lady Coote, breaking the silence, that Mrs. Macata's children should have mumps. At least, I don't mean exactly funny." "What?" said the Countess. "Are mumps?" Bundle and Lady Coote started simultaneously to explain. Finally, between them, they managed it. "I suppose Hungarian children have it?" asked Lady Coote. Said the Countess. "Hungarian children, they suffer from it?" "I do not know," said the Countess. "How should I?" Lady Coote looked at her with some surprise. "But I understood that you worked—" "Oh, that." The Countess uncrossed her legs, took her cigarette holder from her mouth, and began to talk rapidly. "I will tell you some horrors," she said. "Horrors that I have seen. Incredible. You would not believe." And she was as good as her word. She talked fluently, with a graphic power of description. Incredible scenes of starvation and misery were painted by her with the benefit of her audience. She spoke of Budapest shortly after the war and traced its vicissitudes to the present day. She was dramatic, but she was also, to Bundle's mind, a little like a gramophone record. You turned it on, and there you were. Presently, just as suddenly, she would stop. Lady Coote was thrilled to the marrow. That much was clear. She sat with her mouth slightly open and her large, sad, dark eyes fixed on the Countess. Occasionally she interpolated the comment of her own. "One of my cousins had 3 children burned to death. Awful, wasn't it?" The Countess paid no attention. She went on, and she finally stopped as suddenly as she had begun. "There," she said, "I have told you. We have money, but no organization. It is organization we need." Lady Coote sighed. "I've heard my husband say that nothing can be done without regular methods. He attributes his own success entirely to that. He declares he would have never got on without them." She sighed again, and a sudden fleeting vision passed before her eyes of Sir Oswald, who had not got on in the world. A Sir Oswald who retained, in all essentials, the attributes of that cheery young man in the bicycle shop. Just for a second it occurred to her how much pleasanter life might have been for her if Sir Oswald had not had regular methods. By a quite understandable association of ideas, she turned to Bundle. "Tell me, Lady Eileen," she said, "do you like that head gardener of yours?" "MacDonald? Well—" Bundle hesitated. "One couldn't exactly like MacDonald," she explained apologetically, "but he's a first-class gardener." "Oh, I know he is," said Lady Coote. "He's all right if he keeps his place," said Bundle. "I suppose so," said Lady Coote. She looked enviously at Bundle, who appeared to approach the task of keeping MacDonald in his place so light-heartedly. "I just adore a high-toned garden," said the Countess dreamily. Bundle stared, but at that moment a diversion occurred. Jimmy Thesiger entered the room and spoke directly to her in a strange, hurried voice. "I say, will you come and see those etchings now? They're waiting for you." Bundle left the room hurriedly, Jimmy close behind her. "What etchings?" she asked, as the drawing-room door closed behind her. "No etchings," said Jimmy. "I got to say something to get a hold of you. Come on, Bill is waiting for us in the library. There's nobody there. Bill was striding up and down in the library, clearly in a very perturbed state of mind. Look here, he burst out. I don't like this. I don't like what you being mixed up in all this. 10 to 1, there's going to be roughhouse, and then he looked at her with a kind of pathetic dismay that gave Bundle a warm and comfortable feeling. She ought to be kept out of it, oughtn't she, Jimmy? He appealed to the other. I've told her so, Jimmy. Dash it all, Bundle. I mean, someone might get hurt. Bundle turned round to Jimmy. How much have you told him? Oh, everything. I haven't got the hang of it all yet, confessed Bill. You in that place and the 7 Dials and all that? He looked at her unhappily. I say, Bundle, I wish you wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Get mixed up in these sorts of things. Why not? Said Bundle. They're exciting. Oh, yes, exciting, but they may be damningly dangerous. Look at a poor old Ronnie. Yes, said Bundle. If it hadn't been for your friend Ronnie, I don't suppose I should have ever got what you call mixed up in this thing. But I am, and it's no earthly use in bleating about it. I know you're the most frightful sport, Bundle, but cut out the compliments. Let's make plans. To her relief, Bill reacted favorably to the suggestion. You're right about the formula, he said. Eberhard's got some sort of formula with him, or rather Sir Oswald has. The stuff has been tested out at the works, very secretly and all. Eberhard has been down there with him. They're all in the study now, what you might call coming down to brass tacks. How long is Sir Stanley Digby staying? Asked Jimmy. Going back to town tomorrow. Said Jimmy. Then one thing's clear. If, as I suppose, Sir Stanley will be taking the formula with him, any funny business there's going to be will be tonight. I suppose it will. Not a doubt about it. That narrows the thing down very comfortably. But bright lads will have to be at their brightest. We must come down to details. First of all, where will the sacred formula be tonight? Will Eberhard have it or Sir Oswald Coote? Neither. I understand it will be handed over to the Air Minister this evening for him to take to town tomorrow. In that case, O'Rourke will have it. Sure to. Well, there's only one thing for it. If we believe someone's going to have a shot at pinching the paper, we've got to keep watch tonight, Bill, my boy. Bundle opened her mouth as though to protest, but shut it again without speaking. By the way, continued Jimmy, did I recognize the commissionaire from Harrods in the hall this evening, or was it your old friend Lestrade from Scotland Yard? Scintillating, Watson, said Bill. I suppose, said Jimmy, that we are rather butting in on his preserves. Can't be helped, said Bill. Not if we mean to see this thing through. Then it's agreed, said Jimmy. We divide the night into 2 watches. Again, Bundle opened her mouth and again shut it without speaking. Right you are, agreed Bill. Who'll take the first duty? Shall we spend for it? Might as well. All right, here goes. Heads, you first, second, I. Tails, vice versa. Bill nodded. The coin spun in the air. Jimmy bent to look at it. Tails, he said. Damn, said Bill. You get the first half and probably any fun that's going on. Oh, you never know, said Jimmy. Criminals are very uncertain. What time shall I wake you? 3:30? That's about fair, I think. And now at last Bundle spoke. What about me? She asked. Nothing doing. You go to bed and sleep. Oh, said Bundle. That's not very exciting. You never know, said Jimmy kindly. You may be murdered in your sleep whilst Bill and I escape scot-free. Well, there's always that possibility. Do you know, Jimmy, I don't half like the look of that countess. I suspect her. Nonsense, cried Bill hotly. She's absolutely above suspicion. How do you know? Retorted Bundle. Because I do. One of the fellows at the Hungarian embassy vouched for her. Oh, said Bundle, momentarily taken aback by his fervor. You girls are all the same, grumbled Bill, just because she's a jolly good-looking woman. Bundle was only too well acquainted with this unfair masculine line of argument. Well, don't you go and pour confidences into her shell-pink ear, she remarked. I'm going to bed. I was bored stiff in that drawing room, and I'm not going back." She left the room. Bill looked at Jimmy. "Good old Bundle," he said. "I was afraid we might have trouble with her. You know how keen she is to be in on everything. I think the way she took it was just wonderful." "So did I," said Jimmy. "It staggered me." "She got some sense, Bundle has. She knows when a thing's plumb impossible. I say, oughtn't we to have some lethal weapons? Chaps usually do when they're going into this sort of a stunt." "I have a blue-nosed automatic," said Jimmy with a gentle pride. "It weighs several pounds and looks most murderous. I'll lend it to you when time comes." Bill looked at him with respect and envy. "What made you think of getting that?" he said. "I don't know," said Jimmy carelessly. It just came to me." "I hope we shan't need to shoot the wrong person," said Bill with some anxiety. "That would be unfortunate," said Mr. Thesiger gravely. Chapter 18. Jimmy's Adventures. Our chronicle must here split into three separate distinct portions. The night was to prove an eventful one, and each of the three persons involved saw it from his or her own individual angle. We will begin with that pleasant and engaging youth, Mr. Jimmy Thesiger, at a moment when he has at last exchanged final good nights with his fellow conspirator, Bill Eversley. "Don't forget," said Bill, 3 a.m., if you're still alive, that is, he added kindly. "I may be an ass," said Jimmy, with rancorous remembrance of a remark Bundle had repeated to him, "but I am not nearly so much an ass as you think I am, or as I might look." "That's what you said about Jerry Wade," said Bill slowly. "Do you remember? And that very night he—" "Shut up, you damn fool," said Jimmy. "Haven't you got any tact?" "Of course I have got tact," said Bill. "I'm a budding diplomatist." "All diplomatists have tact." "Ah," said Jimmy, "you must be still in whatever they call the larval stage." "I can't get over Bundle," said Bill, reverting abruptly to a former topic. "I should certainly have said that she'd be, well, difficult. Bundle's improved. She's improved very much." "That's what your chief was saying," said Jimmy. "He said he was agreeably surprised." "I thought Bundle was laying it on a bit thick myself," said Bill. "But Cotters is such an ass. He'd swallow anything. Well, night, night. I expect you'll have a bit of a job waking me when the time comes, but stick to it. It won't be much good if you've taken a leaf out of Jerry Wade's book," said Jimmy maliciously. Bill looked at him reproachfully. "What the hell do you want to do? To go and make a chap uncomfortable for?" he demanded. You're only getting your own back," said Jimmy. "Toddle along." But Bill lingered. He stood uncomfortably, first on one foot, then the other. "Look here," he said. "Yes?" "What I mean to say is, well, I mean you'll be all right. And all that, won't you? It's all very well raging, but when I think of poor Jerry and then poor Ronnie—" Jimmy gazed at him in exasperation. Bill was one of those undoubtedly meant-well persons, but the result of his efforts would not be described as heartening. "I see," he remarked, "that I shall have to show you Leopold." He slipped his hand into his pocket of the blue suit into which he had just changed and held out something for Bill's inspection. A real, genuine, blue-nosed automatic, he said with a modest pride. "No, I say," Bill said. "Is it really?" He was undoubtedly impressed. "Stevens, my man, got him for me. Warranted, clean, and methodical in his habits. You press the button and Leopold does the rest." "Oh," said Bill. "I say, Jimmy." Yes, be careful, won't you? I mean, don't go loosing that thing off at anybody. Pretty awkward if you shot old Digby walking in his sleep. That's all right, said Jimmy, naturally. I want to get value out of Leopold. Now I've bought him. But I'll curb my bloodthirsty instincts as far as possible. Well, night night, said Bill for the 14th time, and this time really did depart. Jimmy was left alone to take up his vigil. Sir Stanley Digby occupied a room at the extremity of the west wing. A bathroom adjoined it on one side, and on the other, a communicating door led from a smaller room, which was tenanted by Mr. Terence O'Rourke. The doors of these three rooms gave on to a short corridor. The watcher had a simple task. A chair placed inconspicuously in the shadow of an oak press just where the corridor ran into the main gallery formed the perfect vantage ground. There was no other way into the west wing, and anyone going to or from it could not fail to be seen. One electric light was still on. Jimmy ensconced himself comfortably cross-legged and waited. Leopold lay in readiness across his knee. He glanced at his watch. It was 20 minutes to 1, just an hour since the household had retired to rest. Not a sound broke the stillness except for the far-off ticking of a clock somewhere. Somehow or other, Jimmy did not much care for that sound. It recalled things, Jerry Wade, and those 7 ticking clocks on the mantelpiece, whose hand had placed them there, and why. He shivered. It was a creepy business, this waiting. He didn't wonder that things happened at spiritualistic seances. Sitting in the gloom, one got all worked up, ready to start at least sound. And unpleasant thoughts came crowding in on a fellow. Ronnie Devereaux and Jerry Wade, both young, both full of life and energy, ordinary, jolly, healthy young men. And now, where were they? Dank earth, worms getting them. Ugh! Why couldn't he put these horrible thoughts out of his mind? He looked again at his watch. 20 minutes past 1. How the time crawled. Extraordinary girl, Bundle. Fancy having the nerve and the daring actually to get into the midst of the Seven Dials place. Why hadn't he had the nerve and the initiative to think of that? He supposed because the thing was so fantastic. Number 7. Who the hell could number 7 be? Was he, perhaps, in the house at this minute, disguised as a servant? He couldn't, surely, be one of the guests. No, that was impossible. But then the whole thing was impossible. If he hadn't believed Bundle to be essentially truthful, well, he would have thought she had invented the whole thing. He yawned, queer, to feel sleepy, and yet, at the same time, strung up. He looked again at his watch. 10 minutes to 2. Time was getting on. And then, suddenly, he held his breath and leaned forward, listening. He heard something. The minutes went past. There it was again, the creak of a floorboard. But it came from downstairs somewhere. There it was again, a slight, ominous creak. Somebody was moving stealthily about the house. Jimmy sprang noiselessly to his feet. He crept silently to the head of the staircase. Everything seemed perfectly quiet. Yet he was quite certain he had really heard that stealthy sound. It was not imagination. Very quietly and cautiously he crept down the staircase, Leopold clasped tightly in his right hand. Not a sound in the big hall. If he had been correct in assuming the muffled sound came from directly beneath him, then it must have come from the library. Jimmy stole to the door of it, listened but heard nothing. Then, suddenly, flinging the door open, he switched on the lights. Nothing. The big room flooded with light, but it was empty. Jimmy frowned. I could have sworn, he murmured to himself. The library was a large room with 3 windows which opened onto the terrace. Jimmy strode across the room. The middle window was unlatched. He opened it, stepped out on the terrace, looking at it from the end of it. Nothing. Looks all right, he murmured to himself. And yet, He remained for a minute, lost in thought. Then he stepped back into the library, crossing the door. He locked it, put the key in his pocket. Then he switched off the light. He stood for a minute listening, then crossed softly to open the door and stood there, Leopold ready in his hand. Was there, or was there not, a soft patter of feet along the terrace? No, his imagination. He grasped Leopold tightly and stood and listened. In the distance, a stable clock chimed 2. Chapter 19. Bundle's Adventures. Bundle Brent was a resourceful girl. She was also a girl of imagination. She had foreseen that Bill, if not Jemmy, would make objections to her participation in the possible dangers of the night. It was not Bundle's idea to take time to waste on an argument. She had laid her own plans and made her own arrangements. A glance from her bedroom window shortly before dinner had been highly satisfactory. She had known that the gray walls of the abbey were plentifully adorned with ivy, but the ivy outside her window was particularly solid-looking and would present no difficulties to one of her athletic propensities. She had no fault to find with Bill's or Jimmy's arrangements as far as they went, but in her opinion they did not go far enough. She offered no criticism because she intended to see to that side of things herself. Briefly, while Jimmy and Bill were devoting themselves to the inside of the abbey, Bundle intended to devote her attentions to the outside. Her own meek acquiescence in the tame role assigned to her gave her an infinitely more pleasurable thought, though she wondered scornfully how either of the two men could be so easily deceived. Bill, of course, had never been famous for scintillating brain power. On the other hand, he knew, or should have known, his Bundle. And she considered that Jimmy Thesiger, though only slightly acquainted with her, ought to have known better than to imagine that she could be so easily and summarily disposed of. Once in the privacy of her own room, Bundle set rapidly to work. First, she discarded her evening dress and the negligible trifle which she wore beneath it, and started again to speak from the foundations. Bundle had not brought her maid with her, and she herself had packed. Otherwise, the puzzled French woman might have wondered why her lady took a pair of riding breeches and no further equine equipment. Arrayed or dressed in riding breeches, rubber-soled shoes, and a dark-colored pullover, Bundle was ready for the fray. She glanced at the time. As yet, it was only 12:30. Too early by far. Whatever was going to happen would not happen for some time. The occupants of the house must all be given time to get off to sleep. 1:30 was the time fixed by Bundle for the start of the operations. She switched off her light and sat down by the window to wait. Punctuality. At the appointed moment she rose, punched up the sash, and swung her leg over the sill. The night was a fine one, cold and still. There was starlight, but no moonlight. She found the descent very easy. Bundle and her two sisters had run wild in the park at Chimneys as small children, and they could climb like cats. Bundle arrived at a flower bed, rather breathless, but quite unscathed. She paused a minute to take stock of her plans. She knew that the rooms occupied by the Air Minister and his secretary were in the west wing. That was the opposite side of the house from where Bundle was now standing. A terrace ran along the southwest side of the house, ending abruptly against a walled fruit garden. Bundle stepped out of the flower bed and turned the corner of the house to where the terrace began on the south side. She crept very quietly along it, keeping close to the shadow of her house. But as she reached the second corner, she got a shock, for a man was standing there, with the clear intention of barring her way. The next instant she recognized him. Superintendent Battle. "You did give me a fright." "That's what I was here for," said Superintendent pleasantly. Bundle looked at him. It struck her now, as so often before, how remarkably little camouflage there was about him. He was large and solid and noticeable. He was somehow very English, but of one thing Bundle was quite sure: Superintendent Battle was no fool. "What are you really doing here?" she asked, still in a whisper. "Just seeing," said Battle. "There's nobody about who shouldn't be." "Oh," said Bundle, rather taken aback. "You, for instance, Lady Eileen. I don't suppose you usually take a walk at this time of night." "Do you mean," said Bundle slowly, "that you want me to go back?" Superintendent Battle nodded approvingly. "You're very quick, Lady Eileen. That's just what I do mean. Did you come out of a door or the window?" "The window. It's easy as anything climbing down from this ivy." Superintendent Battle looked up at it thoughtfully. "Yes," he said, "I should say it would be." "And you want me to go back?" said Bundle. "I'm rather sick about that. I wanted to go round on the west terrace." "Perhaps you won't be the only one who will want to do that," said Battle. "Nobody could miss seeing you," said Bundle rather spitefully. The superintendent seemed rather pleased than otherwise. "I hope they won't," he said. "No unpleasantness, that's my motto. And if you'll excuse me, Lady Eileen, I think it's time you were going back to bed." The firmness of his tone admitted of no parley. Rather crestfallen, Bundle retraced her steps. She was halfway up the ivy when a sudden idea occurred to her. She nearly relaxed her grip and fell. Supposing Superintendent Battle suspected her? There had been something, yes, surely there had been something in his manner that vaguely suggested the idea. She couldn't help laughing as she crawled over the sill into her bedroom. Fancy the solid superintendent suspecting her! Though she had so far obeyed Battle's orders to return to her room, Bundle had no intention of going to bed and sleeping, nor did she think that Battle had really intended her to do so. He was not a man to expect impossibilities, and to remain quiescent when something daring and exciting might be going on was a sheer impossibility to Bundle. She glanced at her watch. It was 10 minutes to 2. After a moment or two of irresolution, she cautiously opened the door. Not a sound. Everything was still and peaceful. She stole cautiously along the passageway. Once she halted, thinking she heard a board creak somewhere, but then, convinced that she was mistaken, she went on. She was now in the main corridor, making her way to the west wing. She reached the angle of the intersection and peered cautiously round. Then she stared in blank surprise. The watcher's post was empty. Jimmy Thesiger was not there. Bundle stared in complete amazement. What had happened? Why had Jimmy left his post? What did it mean? And at that moment she heard a clock strike 2. She was still standing there, debating what to do next, when suddenly her heart gave a leap, and then seemed to stand still. The door handle of Terence O'Rourke's room slowly turning. Bundle watched, fascinated, but the door did not open. Instead, the doorknob returned slowly to its original position. What did it mean? Suddenly, Bundle came to a resolution. Jimmy, for some unknown reason, had deserted his post. She must get hold of Bill. Quickly and noiselessly, Bundle fled along the way she had come. She burst unceremoniously into Bill's room. "Bill, wake up! Oh, do wake up!" It was an urgent whisper she sent forth, but there came no response to it. "Bill!" breathed Bundle. Impatiently she switched on the lights, and then stood dumbfounded. The room was empty, and the bed was not even slept in. Where, then, was Bill? Suddenly she caught her breath. This was not Bill's room. The dainty negligee thrown over a chair, the feminine knickknacks on the dressing table, the black velvet evening dress thrown carelessly over a chair. Of course, in her haste she had mistaken the doors. This was the Countess Radisky's room. But where, oh where, was the Countess? And just as Bundle was asking herself the question, the silence of the night was suddenly broken, and in no uncertain manner. The clamor came from below. In an instant, Bundle had sped out of the Countess's room and downstairs. The sounds came from the library, a violent crashing of chairs being overturned. Bundle rattled vainly at the library door. It was locked, but she could clearly hear the struggle that was going on within. The panting and scuffling, curses in manly tones, and the occasional crash as some light piece of furniture came into the line of the battle, and then, sinister and distinct, breaking the peace of the night for good and all, 2 shots in rapid succession. Chapter 20. Lorraine's Adventures. Lorraine Wade sat up in bed and switched on the light. It was exactly 10 minutes to 1. She had gone to bed early, at 9:30. She possessed the useful art of being able to wake herself up at the required time. So she had been able to enjoy some hours of refreshing sleep. 2 dogs slept in the room with her, and one of those now raised its head and looked at her inquiringly. "Quiet, Lurcher," said Lorraine. The big animal put his head down again, obediently, waiting for her from between his shaggy eyelashes, and watching her. It was true that Bundle had once doubted the meekness of Lorraine Wade, but that brief moment of suspicion had passed. Lorraine had seemed so entirely reasonable, so willing to be kept out of everything, and yet, if you studied the girl's face, you saw that there was strength of purpose in the small, resolute jaw and the lips that closed together so firmly. Lorraine rose and dressed herself in a tweed coat and skirt. Into one pocket the coat she dropped an electric torch. Then she opened the drawer of her dressing table and took out a small ivory-handled pistol, almost a toy, in appearance at least. She had bought it the day before at Harrod's, and she was very pleased with it. She gave a final glance around the room to see if she had forgotten anything, and at that moment the big dog rose and came over to her, looking up at her with pleading eyes and a wagging tail. Lorraine shook her head. "No, Lurcher, can't go. Missus can't take you. Go to stay here. Be a good boy." She dropped a kiss on the dog's head, made him lie down on the rug again, then slipped noiselessly out of the room, closing the door behind her. She let herself out of the house by the side door and made her way round to the garage, where her little 2-seater car was in readiness. There was a gentle slope, and she let the car run silently down it, not starting the engine till she was some way away from the house. Then she glanced at the watch on her arm and pressed her foot down on the accelerator. She left the car at the spot she had previously marked down. There was a gap there in the fence that she could easily get through. A few minutes later, slightly muddy, Lorraine stood inside the grounds of Wavern Abbey. As noiselessly as possible, she made her way towards the venerable ivy-covered building. In the distance, a stable clock chimed 2. Lorraine's heart beat faster as she drew near the terrace. There was no one about, no sign of life anywhere. Everything seemed peaceful and undisturbed. She reached the terrace and stood there, looking about her. Suddenly, without the least warning, something from above fell with a flop almost at her feet. Lorraine stooped to pick it up. It was a brown paper packet, loosely wrapped. Holding it, Lorraine looked up. There was an open window just above her head, and even as she looked, a leg swung over it, and a man began to climb down the ivy. Lorraine waited for no more. She took on her heels and ran, still clasping the brown paper packet. Behind her, the noise of a struggle suddenly broke out. A hoarse voice. "Let me go!" Another that she knew well. "Not if I know it. You would. Still Lorraine ran, blindly, as though in a panic-stricken, right round the corner of the terrace and slap into the arms of a large, solidly built man. There, said Superintendent Battle kindly. Lorraine was struggling to speak. Oh, quick! They're killing each other. Oh, do be quick!" There was a sharp crack of a revolver shot, and then another. Superintendent Battle started to run. Lorraine followed, back round the corner and the terrace, and along the library window. The window was open. Battle stooped and switched on an electric torch. Lorraine was close beside him, peering over his shoulder. She gave a little sobbing gasp. On the threshold of the window lay Jimmy Thesiger, in what looked like a pool of blood. His right arm lay dangling in a curious position. Lorraine gave a sharp cry. "He's dead!" she wailed. "Oh, Jimmy, Jimmy, he's dead!" Now, said Superintendent Battle soothingly. "Don't you take on so. The young man isn't dead. I'll be bound. See if you can find the lights and turn them on." Lorraine obeyed. She stumbled across the room, found the switch by the door, pressed it down. The room was flooded with light. Superintendent Battle uttered a sigh of relief. "It's all right. He's only shot in the right arm. He's fainted, though. Loss of blood. Come and give me a hand with him." There was a pounding on the library door. Voices were heard, asking, expostulating, demanding. Lorraine looked doubtfully at it. "Shall I?" "No." "Hurry," said Battle. "We'll let them in presently. You come give me a hand." Lorraine came obediently. The superintendent had produced a large, clean pocket handkerchief and neatly bandaged the wounded man's arm. Lorraine helped him. "He'll be all right," said the superintendent. "Don't you worry. As many lives as a cat's, these young fellows. It wasn't the loss of blood knocked him out either. He must have caught his head a crack on the floor as he fell." Outside, the knocking on the door had become tremendous. The voice of George Lomax, furiously unpraised, came louder and distinct. "Who is in there? Open the door at once." Superintendent Battle sighed. "I suppose we shall have to," he said abruptly. A pity." His eyes darted around, taking the scene in. An automatic lay at Jimmy's side. The superintendent picked it up gingerly, holding it very delicately, and examined it. He grunted and laid it on the table. Then he stepped across and unlocked the door. Several people almost fell into the room. Nearly everybody said something at that same minute. George Lomax, spluttering with obdurate words which refused to come with sufficient fluency, exclaimed, The meaning of this! It's you, Superintendent! What's happened? I say, what's happened?" Bill Eversley said, "My God, old Jimmy!" and stared at the limp figure on the ground. Lady Coote, clad in a resplendent purple dressing gown, cried out, "The poor boy!" and swept past the Superintendent Battle and bent over prostrate Jimmy in a motherly fashion. Bundle said, "Lorraine!" Herr Eberhard said, "Gott im Himmel!" and other words of that nature. Sir Stanley Digby said, "My God, what's all this?" A housemaid said, "Look at the blood!" and screamed with pleasurable excitement. A footman said, "Lord!" The butler said, with a good deal more bravery in his manner than had been noticeable a few minutes earlier, "Now then, this won't do," and waved away under-servants. The efficient Mr. Rupert Bateman said to George, "Shall we get rid of some of these people, sir?" Then they all took a fresh breath. "Incredible," said George Lomax. "Battle, what has happened?" Battle gave him a look, and George's discreet habits assumed their usual sway. "Now then," he said, moving to the door, "everyone go back to bed, please. There's been little accident," said Superintendent Battle easily. Accident? I shall be much obliged if everyone will go back to bed." Everyone was clearly reluctant to do so. "Lady Coote, please." "The poor boy," said Lady Coote in a motherly fashion. She rose from a kneeling position with great reluctance, and as she did so, Jimmy stirred and sat up. "Hello," he said thickly. "What's the matter?" He looked round him vacantly for a minute or two, and then intelligence returned to his eye. "Have you got him?" he demanded eagerly. "Got who?" "The man. Climbed down the ivy. I was by the window there, grabbed him, and we had no idea of set to—" "One of those nasty murderous cat burglars," said Lady Coote. "Poor boy." Jimmy was looking round. "I say, I'm afraid have made rather a mess of things. Fellow was as strong as an ox, and we went fairly waltzing round." The condition of the room was clear proof of the statement. Everything light and breakable within range of 12 feet could be broken, had been broken. "And what happened then?" But Jimmy was looking round for something. Where's Leopold? The pride of the blue-nosed automatics. Battle indicated the pistol on the table. Is this yours, Mr. Thesiger? That's right. That's little Leopold. How many shots have you been fired? One shot. Jimmy looked chagrined. I'm disappointed in Leopold, he murmured. I can't have pressed the button properly, or I'd have gone on shooting. Who shot first? I did, I'm afraid, said Jimmy. You see, the man twisted himself out of my grasp suddenly. I saw him making for the window, and I closed my finger down on Leopold and let him have it. He turned in the window and fired at me. Well, I suppose after that I took the count. He rubbed his head rather ruefully, but Sir Stanley Digby was suddenly alert. Climbing down the ivy, you said. My God, Lomax, you don't think they've got away with it? He rushed from the room. For some curious reason, nobody spoke during his absence. In a few minutes, Sir Stanley returned. His round, chubby face was white as death. My God, Battle, he said. They've got it. O'Rourke's fast asleep, drugged. I think I can't wake him. And the papers have vanished. Okay, my friends, I hope you've enjoyed this very action-oriented set of chapters here. We are now well on our way to finding the solution to this great mystery of what and who is after what and why. We shall continue with this on Monday. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been Indiana Homes. Love to you all, and good night.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.